In this video, we're going to look at how you go about selecting a subobject component. Now, subobject selection is very similar to what we've been doing at the object level. You'll use the same selection tools and for the most part, the same selection options. The difference is there's a little trick to getting down to those smaller subobject elements. Let's take a look. This is a file named subobject selection. You can find it in the working files folder. Now, the big difference in selecting an object versus being able to select a subobject is the mode or state that you've got to be in order to be able to make that selection. You see, unless you enter or open a special mode, you'll never be able to select or work on any subobject component. In other words, there's like a door that you've got to go through or that has to be opened in order to be able to access the subobject elements. Max calls it entering subobject mode. And that kind of makes sense. You got to be in subobject mode in order to be able to select a subobject component. What subobject mode does is put you inside or below the object or shape that you're working on, hence the word sub. And it's only from that location, subobject mode, that you'll be able to manipulate or work on, in other words, a shape or object's subobject elements. So got that? You'll never be able to work on a subobject unless you're in subobject mode. With that established, we now got to figure out just exactly how you get there, the process or technique needed in order to get into subobject mode. Well, there's actually a couple of different ways you can go, with the technique that you choose, then determining what you're basically left with once you get there. That'll make more sense after watching the video that follows this one. In the meantime, though, there's one other essential thing to know, and that's that you'll be using a different command to get to the subobject on a 2D shape than the command you'll use to get to the subobject on a 3D object. Better put, you'll be using a different modifier, a topic we'll be covering in the Working with Modifiers chapter. For now, just know that 2D shapes require one way to get to the subobject, while 3D objects require another. Let's select the yellow ellipse and see what we're working with in the Modify column. Frankly, not much. We've got the controls to change the length and the width on the ellipse, but that's about it. So in order to gain access to the subobject components on the ellipse, we're going to be applying a modifier that'll allow us to edit our spline. That modifier is oddly enough called Edit Spline. Now remember, it's in the Working with Modifiers chapter that we'll be discussing what modifiers are in detail. For now, we'll simply proceed with showing you how the process is done. At the top of the modifier column, click on the arrow that's just to the right of the name modifier list. Once opened, drop down to the name Edit Spline and click. That essentially adds the Edit Spline modifier into the stack. Okay, now directly below where it says Modifier List, you'll now see the name Edit Spline. See the plus sign to the left of that name? Go ahead and click that. That opens up the Edit Spline modifier where we can now see the subobject selections. Now you've got three of them: Vertex, Segment, and Spline. Working at the vertex level, let's now put our mouse on the screen and window select one of the dots that you see. That's a vertex, and you'll notice that when selected, its color turns red. Try selecting a different one. Now when you do so, you'll notice that now it selects with the first one becoming deselected. You can add to a selection by holding down the Control key, then either clicking directly on a vertex or windowing around it. You can also easily make a multiple vertex selection by simply windowing around the verts that you'd like to select. Let's now, back in the Modify column, click on the Segment level. Now the segments are going to be the lines that connect the vertices together. Go ahead and click on one. Again, holding down the Control key enables you to make a multiple selection. Let's also try a spline selection. Back on the right, we'll click on the entry spline. Now on our current shape, the entire line is considered to be a spline. So windowing any part of it will select the whole thing. In accessing subobject mode, you also have little icons in the selection section that you can use. You'll find that below the modifier stack. Here's Vertex, Segment, and Spline. Notice that as you click on that button, it highlights that level in the stack. You can also use keyboard shortcuts to enter subobject mode. Using the numbers at the top of your keyboard, typing 1 will put you in Vertex mode, 2 Segment mode, and 3 down to Spline mode. Now be aware that the number pad on the right-hand side of your keyboard will not activate those shortcut commands. By the way, you can also get to the subobject levels by right-clicking on the screen with your mouse. In the upper left-hand square, you'll see Vertex, Segment, and Spline. When wanting to get back to the top level of the modifier, in essence getting out of subobject mode, You can either go to the stack, clicking on the name Edit Spline, or you can right-click to open the menu, then choose Top Level. That'll be found in the upper left-hand square of the menu. Always remember, unless you're out of subobject mode, you won't be able to select anything else in your view. Let's go ahead and delete our shape. Then with the right mouse click, we'll choose in the upper right-hand square, Unhide All. Making subobject selections on a 3D object is almost identical to what we've been doing on our 2D shape with only one difference. And that's that you have to use a different modifier in order to open the subobject door. Where in which we used an Edit Spline to gain access to our spline, for an object which you'll sometimes hear as being referred to as a mesh, you're going to be needing an Editing Mesh modifier. There's a couple of those. Let's go see what we can find. With the sphere selected, we'll go back into the modifier list. Now, what looks like something that we could use to edit a mesh? Well, how about the Edit Mesh? Now, before we do that though, be aware that you could also use a modifier called Edit Poly. Let's stick with the Edit Mesh for now. With the entry loaded in the modifier stack, let's go ahead and open up its plus sign to the left of its name. There's your 3D subobject selection commands: Vertex, Edge, Face, Polygon, and Element. Be aware that both Polygon and Element are simply different ways of being able to select faces. We again also have icons in the selection section that'll do the same thing. And like with the Edit Spline, there's also the hotkeys that we can use to get into a certain subobject mode. One will take you to Vertex, 2 edges, 3 faces, 4 goes to Polygon, and 5 will go to Element. You also, like when working at the 2D level, have your right-click options. So here we can see Vertex and the rest. Again, you also have the top level when you want to get out of subobject mode. Let's go ahead and get in Vertex mode. The vertices are going to be the little blue dots that you see on the screen. Go ahead and window around a couple. You can add to that selection by again holding down the Control key. Try that. Let's enter Edge Selection. The edges are going to be the lines you see on the screen. Window around a bunch of those. Let's try the faces. This time I'll type 3 to enter face mode. And then window on the screen with my mouse. The areas that light up in red, those are going to be your selected faces. Using Polygon will in essence do the same thing. Try that. Now an element selection, which we'll be covering in another video, is a little bit different. Go ahead and select that option, then click anywhere on the sphere. Again, stay tuned, we'll talk about what an element selection is later on. Returning to the top of the stack, basically getting out of subobject mode can again be done a couple different ways. Either clicking at the top of the list where it reads Edit Mesh, or simply by right-clicking, then in the upper left-hand square, choosing Top Level. So there you go with making subobject selections, both at the 2D and 3D level. Practice up using all the techniques to getting down to the subobject level, and use them when working on your own personal projects.